assistance through the Latin corridor to the civilian population in the area or through any other route, including Agdam, for several weeks. Although medical evacuations continue, the ICRC has not been able to bring medical items into the area since the 7th of July, and their food deliveries stopped on the 14th of June. ICRC has highlighted concerning shortages of essential food items and life-saving medical supplies. Madam President, members of the Council, international humanitarian law is very clear. Parties must allow and facilitate the rapid and unimpeded passage of humanitarian relief for all civilians in need. They must ensure that humanitarian relief personnel have the freedom of movement required for their functions. What matters is that passage is as rapid as possible in the circumstances. It is therefore critical that the ICRC's delivery of humanitarian relief be allowed to resume through any available routes or routes. Madam President, the ICRC is doing everything it can, but as a single organization, it can only cover the most urgent needs. Other impartial humanitarian relief must also be allowed to reach civilians who need it, and a sustainable solution for safe and regular transit of people and goods must be found. Here I would reference the United Nations Secretary General's statement on the 2nd of August, in which he expressed particular concern about reports of the deteriorating humanitarian situation on the ground and called for urgent steps to facilitate access. It is incumbent on the parties not to impede or politicize any principled humanitarian effort. Responding to humanitarian needs is not an act of legitimization or recognition. It does not take sides, and it does not yield to political influence. OCHA will continue to engage with parties on humanitarian access to meet the essential needs of civilians in these areas, in the area. The United Nations country teams in both Armenia and Azerbaijan also maintain open channels with the authorities in those countries and stand fully ready to do everything they can to ensure a response to humanitarian needs. I thank you.
I thank Ms. Warsornu for her briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of Gabon.
Merci, Madame la
Thank you, Madam President. I thank Director Adam Warsornu for that briefing, and I welcome the presence at this meeting of the Foreign Affairs Minister of Armenia and representative of Azerbaijan and Turkey, as well as the delegate of the European Union. Madam President, we are deeply concerned by the humanitarian situation of the civilian population living in Nagorno-Karabakh. These, according to the latest reports of the ICRC, these civilians are facing shortages of food, medicine, and medical equipment, essential hygiene items, as well as basic services. This is especially urgent when it comes to vulnerable persons, including children, the sick, pregnant women, and the elderly, the survival of whom depends almost exclusively on humanitarian aid. My country reiterates that humanitarian aid must be provided urgently without any politicization. The parties must adhere strictly to their obligations under international humanitarian law, especially the part about not hindering humanitarian access and freedom of movement of persons and goods. Access to the Nagorno-Karabakh region must be guaranteed in order to prevent further jeopardization of the lives of the civilian population there. It is also crucial that sick persons be able to receive treatment without disruption, and that all health-related evacuations, when necessary, can be carried out under satisfactory conditions. Madam President, my country remains convinced that the crisis between Azerbaijan and Armenia must be resolved through dialogue while complying with international law. To this end, discussions on the political environment should continue in order to prevent the risk of a new armed conflict and to arrive at a lasting, irreversible, definitive resolution of the conflict. We call on the parties to implement the existing agreements and to continue negotiations based on the 3C framework under the tripartite agreement of November 10, 2021, as well as the joint declaration in order to find an agreement on key issues, including signing a peace treaty and delimiting borders. In any case, it is urgent to reduce tensions along the borders and to ensure that negotiations in Brussels, which are upcoming, will be successful. This means that the parties must take a responsible approach and must not use military threats, nor incendiary rhetoric, nor hate speech aiming at bringing back the fears of history. In conclusion, I'd like to call on all parties to build on the positive progress from May and June in order to steadily progress toward peace and normalization between the two countries. My country commends all of the facilitators and encourages regional initiatives in order to promote the building of a lasting peace. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Gabon for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of Brazil.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, dear colleagues, I thank Mrs. Osborne for her update on the situation in the Lachin corridor. I also welcome the delegations of Armenia, led by its foreign minister, of Azerbaijan, Turkey, and the European Union. We are concerned about reports on the deterioration of the humanitarian situation in Karabakh. Of special concern are the reports on further tightening of the roadblock last June, preventing assistance to the civilian population, including vulnerable individuals and those in poor health conditions. Brazil reaffirms its commitment to the respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Armenia and Azerbaijan within their internationally recognized borders. Measures to reinforce border controls, however, must take into account basic principles of humanitarian law in order to prevent or limit the suffering of innocent civilians. We recall that the persistence of the current stalemate, regardless of its causes, threatens the well-being and the lives of thousands of people. We urge the parties to explore mechanisms to ensure unimpeded humanitarian access to Karabakh, including the feasibility of the Agdam-Kankendi route. We consider it essential to find an urgent solution to the crisis, which may become even worse in the coming months with the approach of winter. Madam President, Brazil understands that this conflict originates from a complex situation that extends over generations. Thousands of people lost their lives. We believe that it is necessary to stop this cycle of violence, which implies abandoning the aggressive rhetoric adopted by some of those involved and strengthening confidence-building measures. Brazil, with its vibrant community of Armenian descent, encouraged the preservation of dialogue channels between the parties and underscores its support for the terms of the ceasefire agreement. The trilateral declaration of November 9, 2020, offers a roadmap for peace building. It is essential that the parties adhere to the commitments assumed at the time and remain engaged in the pursuit of a definitive solution to the conflict. This Council should follow developments there with close attention and a committed willingness to help where possible. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Brazil for their statement. I give the floor to the representative of France.
Je vous remercie.
I thank you, Madam President. I would also like to thank the representative of OSHA for her briefing. I also welcome the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia today. I would like to highlight 3 points. Firstly, the restrictions and total blockage of traffic on the corridor linking Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh for more than 8 months are now causing a humanitarian crisis. The persistent blockage of the Lachin corridor by Azerbaijan continues to isolate the population of Nagorno-Karabakh from the rest of the world, with no legitimate reason to justify such a situation, which runs counter to the principles of international humanitarian law. This situation, combined with the interruptions to the supply of gas and electricity, the drying up of water resources, the difficulties encountered by the population in gaining access to seeds, the shortage of fuel, which is hampering agricultural work, is now degenerating into a humanitarian crisis. The risk of famine, of widespread shortages, including of medicines, is imminent. France deplores the blocking of the humanitarian aid convoy dispatched last July by the Armenian authorities in an attempt to remedy this tragic situation. The restrictions and obstacles imposed on the activities of the ICRC and other humanitarian actors in violation of international law are not acceptable. In view of the gravity of the humanitarian situation, France calls for the unconditional and immediate restoration of the free movement of goods, people and merchandise along the Lachin corridor in both directions, and for a continuous supply of gas and electricity to the population. Since our last public meeting, the International Court of Justice issued an order on February the 22nd, 2023. The order indicated provisional measures which are binding and which require Azerbaijan, in accordance with its obligations under the International Convention on the Elimination of all forms of racial discrimination, to take all measures at its disposal to ensure the unimpeded movement of persons, vehicles and goods along the Lachin corridor in both directions. In its order of July 6, 2023, noting the precarity of the situation between the parties, the Court confirmed the need for effective implementation of the measures indicated in its order of February 22, 2023. As the Secretary-General did on August 2nd, France once again calls on Azerbaijan to abide by its international obligations and to implement the measures indicated by the ICJ. In light of the gravity of the situation, France welcomes the action of the ICRC on the ground, to which it will reinforce its support. France calls for the immediate, free and unhindered access for humanitarian organizations and UN agencies to the populations concerned and for the reopening of the Lachin corridor. Madam President, France remains fully committed to promoting a lasting and just peace in the region. To this end, France calls for a resumption of negotiations aimed at resolving all outstanding issues, including the rights and guarantees of the population of Nagorno-Karabakh. Such a settlement can only be achieved through dialogue, excluding any use of force or threat of the use of force. Alongside the European Union, France will continue to contribute to efforts to promote dialogue between Armenia and Azerbaijan. It fully supports and participates in the mediation efforts led by the EU to promote a process of normalization. We will support the search for progress on all subjects under negotiation, including the draft peace treaty, border demarcation, humanitarian issues, and the opening up of communication routes. France stands ready to contribute to these objectives in liaison with all parties and stakeholders. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of France for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Japan.
Madam President, I thank OCHA Director of Operations, Adam Wassorn, for her briefing. We took note of the letters by Armenia and Azerbaijan distributed to the Security Council The arguments of both sides offer different explanations. However, safeguarding local livelihoods must be the utmost priority. The lives of the most vulnerable, including the sick and chronically ill, elderly, women, infirm, and children, must not be threatened. We recall the Secretary General's concern over reports of continued challenges to the freedom of movement along the Lachin corridor and the deteriorating humanitarian situation on the ground. The ICRC is currently facing difficulties to bring humanitarian assistance to the civilian population through the Lachin corridor or any other routes. It is calling the relevant decision makers to let it resume its essential humanitarian operations in the area. Humanitarian access by international organizations must be unimpeded. We urge all parties to grant access as soon as possible. In addition, the ICJ indicated provisional measures on 22nd February 2023 related to ensuring unimpeded movement of persons, vehicles, and cargo along the Lachin corridor in both directions. We reiterate our consistent position that the rule of law must be upheld and that any nation must abide by international law, including the UN Charter and international humanitarian law. Madam President, the final settlement of the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia is crucial for peace and stability in the Caucasus region. The Security Council, which is tasked with maintaining international peace and security, should be committed to this issue. Dialogue between Armenia and Azerbaijan is important. We hope that it will allow issues related to their dispute to be resolved peacefully in accordance with international law. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Japan for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Ghana.
Madam President, I would like to begin by thanking you for convening this meeting on the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. We have listened carefully to the briefing provided by Ms. Edem Wasonu, OCHA Director of Operations, and wish to encourage and enhance United Nations engagement to support the parties to find a durable solution to the long-standing conflict that continues to rupture the peace of the region. Against the backdrop of fresh tensions, hate speech, and dangerous rhetoric in relation to the situation, we welcome the participation in this meeting of Foreign Minister of Armenia and the representative of Azerbaijan, and look forward to hearing their views, which we hope can help the Council in its effort to address the prevailing challenges. We equally welcome the participation in this meeting of the representatives of Turkey and the representative from the delegation of the European Union to the United Nations. Madam President, it is imperative that our messages today should urge the parties to meaningfully engage with all regional and multilateral processes to peacefully resolve the conflict based on the established principles that are mutually acceptable. We recall here previous efforts by regional actors, including the ceasefire declared in a trilateral statement agreed to by the leaders of Armenia, Azerbaijan, and the Russian Federation on 10th November 2020, and emphasized the urgent need for the parties to recommit to its full implementation. As we have underlined previously, we encourage strong international mediation efforts appropriately framed and supported to help douse the flames of intense animosity, mutual distrust, and discontent between the parties, and facilitate an effective political process for peace. We encourage the Secretary General's Good Office's role, urge the reactivated engagement of the OSCE's Minsk Group's co-chairs, and note the positive role of the Collective Security Treaty Organization. We further encourage the parties to fully embrace ongoing mediation efforts and talks under the auspices of the European Union Council. The outcomes of these discussions, including the demarcation and limitation of borders will help, we believe, to reduce tensions, facilitate the normalization of relations, and set the stage for negotiating a future Armenia-Azerbaijan peace treaty. We hold that an open military confrontation and war serves no one's interest, including that of the parties. Rather, it exacerbates the suffering of civilians, particularly women, children, the elderly, and other vulnerable segments of the population. Madam President, on that score, it is paramount that we work with all the parties and concerned actors to ensure unimpeded access by humanitarian actors to the population in the region, as well as their access to goods and services. The Latin corridor and other acceptable viable routes are vital in this endeavor and serve as a critical link to ensuring the right of access to health, essential services and goods, and to freedom of movement. We therefore urge the effective implementation of the orders of the International Court of Justice, ICJ, including the orders issued on 22nd February 2023 and reaffirmed 6th July 2023, related to the measures to ensure unimpeded movement of persons, vehicles, and cargo along the land corridor in both directions. We reiterate that action that could potentially induce a humanitarian catastrophe and needlessly put civilians at risk undercut our shared values and violate international norms, including international humanitarian law and international human rights law. Madam President, for the sake of international peace and security, we call on the parties to immediately de-escalate the situation, guarantee the security, rights, and freedoms of all ethnic populations, and the right of all others who have been displaced to return. Finally, both parties must respect their obligations by refraining from actions that foster mistrust, erode confidence, and complicate efforts to find an amicable settlement to this cyclical conflict. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Ghana for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Albania.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And let me also thank Ms. Osorno for the briefing. Since the last meeting of the Security Council on this issue in December last year, there has been new developments, some of them positive and very encouraging. We welcome and applaud the intensification of the Armenia-Azerbaijan normalization process. Following the negotiations on a peace treaty that were held in the United States in early May, leaders of both countries have had meetings in Brussels and other European capitals. The leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan have reconfirmed publicly their firm commitment to the 1991 Almaty Declaration and the territorial integrity of their countries. Given the heavy past, this firm commitment by both countries to respecting each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity as neighbors, and their readiness to deal and solve the disputes by peaceful means, based on the respect of the UN Charter and international law, is of paramount importance. We welcome the commitment of both parties for a long-term negotiation plan for a comprehensive peace agreement. And stated by the President of the European Union, Charles Michel, only 1 month ago, current efforts represent, and I quote, one of the most comprehensive and vigorous stages of negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In this respect, we welcome plans for the construction of a railway connection, which should take place without delay. We want to believe that parties will be swift to take the offer and the readiness of the EU to contribute financially for this project. Establishing a rail link would prove a strong confidence-building measure and symbolize cooperation to advance shared interests, laying the grounds for further diplomatic and economic cooperation between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In our view, this is what both countries need, what their populations deserve, and what the region must have. Madam President, we are well aware that the road is still uphill and bumpy. A number of problems still persist. As we have seen in various reports and as we heard from Ms. Osorno, parties continue to express serious concerns. Tensions have continued near the Armenian-Azerbaijani border, and there are important pending issues that need particular and continued attention. We have been following very closely the recent development in the Lachin Road. We note that on this issue, the positions of the two countries differ sharply. From January to August this year, there have been close to 60 letters addressed by both parties to the Security Council. While each side develops its own narrative on the situation, one aspect strikes more than anything: a profound lack of trust between the parties on the best ways to deal with the situation of the Azerbaijani citizens of Armenian descent living in the country, and on the urgent need for the parties to get together and work seriously to resolve all related issues. We reiterate our principled position that humanitarian needs must not be politicized. They must not be used to resonate other grievances. Humanitarian needs anywhere, including in the Karabakh region, should only be met. We are absolutely confident that there is enough room to discuss, on one hand, openly and seriously, all issues related to the expressed humanitarian concerns, the freedom of movement through the Lachin Road, including exploring other possibilities, and, on the other hand, any legitimate security concerns. We believe that when humanitarian issues are at stake, everything must be done. Every option must be explored, including, in this respect, the use of other roads, such as the proposed one from Agdam to Kankendi, for the same and only purpose: the delivery of goods to the region to respond quickly and responsibly. We strongly encourage efforts from both sides to ensure that the needs of the population are met. In a broader prospect, we think the parties should work with the same sense of urgency to deal with all other issues, to delimitate their border, demine and demilitarize it through good faith cooperation in order to provide the necessary sense of security, avoid accidents and incidents which, given the volatility of the situation, could quickly lead to heightened tensions and clashes. Parties should avoid unnecessary speculation and heightened rhetoric, and above all, serve the main purpose: advance towards building a future in cooperation and friendship. We know that the legacy of the 30 years of a painful frozen conflict will not be overcome overnight. But the new realities and the determination shown recently by the parties must be fully exploited. In the most friendly and sincere way, we urge both parties that instead of competing on the communication front in a non-productive blame game, they should get together to work to establish more cooperation, more contacts at various levels, make steps that will establish an increased confidence and help address all issues. Nothing should come across to this prospect, which in our view is the only way conducive to having a new and positive reality in the Armenia-Azerbaijani relations. In this respect, we also encourage direct talks between the representatives of the Armenian community in Azerbaijan and the government. Let me end, Madam President, reiterating the importance of pursuing the path of diplomacy as the best way to move forward and overcome the bitter legacy of a conflict that has kept apart the people of two neighboring countries with huge consequences. It is high time to invest in shared benefits, and I thank you.
I thank the representative of Albania for their statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of China.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank Director Osornu for the briefing. I also welcome the Foreign Minister of Armenia, His Excellency Mr. Mirzoyan, and the representative of Azerbaijan. China takes note of the recent letters from Armenia and Azerbaijan to the President of the Security Council and the Secretary General of the UN on the situation in the Lachin corridor. We also take note of the recent statement by the spokesperson for the Secretary General. China has been following closely the developments in the situation and consistently advocates that disputes concerning the Lachin corridor should be settled through dialogue and consultation. We hope and believe that the parties concerned will properly settle all issues, including the humanitarian situation, through diplomatic efforts. Armenia and Azerbaijan are neighbors. It is in the fundamental interest of both countries to achieve common security and common development through cooperation. In recent years, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia have successively issued 4 joint statements, making arrangements respectively for the cessation of hostilities, economic and transport cooperation, and border issues, among others. Recently, Armenia and Azerbaijan have carried out a series of engagement and dialogue through the mediation of relevant parties, demonstrating the political will and concrete actions of both countries to resolve issues in dispute peacefully through diplomatic means. We encourage Armenia and Azerbaijan to continue to meet each other halfway on the basis of the 4 joint statements and the efforts made in the previous period and under the mediation of relevant parties, including Russia, and to properly settle the disputes between them in accordance with universally recognized international law and the norms governing international relations. China supports any diplomatic efforts conducive to realizing this goal and will play a constructive role in this regard. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Malta.
Thank you, President. I thank Director Vosorno for her briefing. Malta is deeply concerned about the situation in the Nagorno-Karabakh region and the ensuing humanitarian situation aggravated by the blockade of the Lachin corridor. It is deplorable that citizens in the region continue to be deprived from essential goods such as food, medicine, and fuel, which has impacted the functioning of medical and education institutions. Malta calls for immediate and unconditional end to this blockade. The implications of the situation on the local population and the lack of humanitarian access to the region is serious and will only worsen as time goes by without any form of redress or remedy. Unimpeded humanitarian access must be given. We appeal to the Azerbaijani authorities to restore free access to the Nagorno-Karabakh region and refrain from further violations of the trilateral statement of 9th November 2020, international humanitarian law and orders by the International Court of Justice. We also take note of the expressed readiness of the Azerbaijani authorities to also supply goods via the city of Agdam. This should not be seen as an alternative to the reopening of the Lachin corridor. Malta calls for an immediate de-escalation of the situation and highlights the importance of reconciliation between both parties in order to prevent unnecessary hardship and loss of life. Everyone must have easy access to basic and essential goods, especially society's most vulnerable groups, including women, children, the elderly, and persons with disability, who should be effectively protected and their well-being prioritized. Women and girls who are internally displaced or are in a refugee-like situation often face intersecting forms of discrimination and have limited access to education, employment, healthcare, and housing, and are inadequately protected from gender-based violence. Malta strongly believes that humanitarian access must not be politicized under any circumstance by any of the actors involved and continues to support and commends the work carried out by the ICRC in the region and by local women organizations that have provided services to victims of domestic violence, psychosocial support, and sanitary and hygiene products. Malta remains fully committed towards constructive dialogue between Armenia and Azerbaijan to a long-lasting peace and stability in the South Caucasus. We encourage confidence-building measures by both the Armenian and Azerbaijani leadership to overcome differences and guarantee the safety and security of citizens in the region. Armenian women, in all their diversity, continue to be marginalized in all stages of peace and reconstruction processes. Only inclusive dialogue and diplomacy can ensure a peaceful settlement to the situation and assure an outcome that is beneficial for the people. In this context, Malta encourages the direct engagement between both sides in attempts to reach a quick resolution to the conflict. Malta reaffirms its support for a negotiated and comprehensive solution for the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and is supportive of the efforts by the OSCE Minsk Group in pursuing this objective. The continued engagement by the EU in facilitating the peaceful resolution of issues between both sides is strongly commended. There is no other viable way forward but to continue working together to overcome the differences and to guarantee the safety and security of citizens in the region. In conclusion, Malta reiterates its call for the immediate removal of the blockade imposed on the Lachin corridor and for restoring of freedom of movement of people and goods in the Nagorno-Karabakh region, both ways. We continue to fully support efforts leading towards sustainable peace, security, and prosperity. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Malta for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Switzerland.
Madam President, thanks Mrs. Sornu for her statement and expresses its appreciation for the indispensable work of the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, or OCHA. We welcome His Excellency the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia, as well as representatives of Azerbaijan and Turkey and the EU. Switzerland supports a peaceful settlement of the differences between Armenia and Azerbaijan and commends the efforts made by the parties and several diplomatic players in this respect. We regret the renewed tension over the last few months. In this context, we are deeply concerned by the increasing deterioration of the humanitarian situation in the area following the restrictions on access through the Lachin corridor. Women, men, and children are finding themselves in an increasingly difficult position, faced with a shortage of medicines and products essential to their survival. Restrictions on access have a profound impact on the most vulnerable, especially children, the sick, the elderly, people with disabilities, and pregnant women. The situation is untenable and must be resolved without delay. It is vital to restore the free passage of civilians and essential goods. We call on the parties to respect the commitments they have taken, notably in the Trilateral Declaration of November 2020. The International Court of Justice has requested that Azerbaijan take all measures at its disposal to ensure the unimpeded movement of persons, vehicles, and cargo along the Lachin corridor in both directions. We call for compliance with the court's decisions. In addition, the parties must take urgent steps to facilitate safe, rapid, and unhindered access for humanitarian actors to civilians in need, as required by international humanitarian law. We joined the RCRC in calling on the parties on July 25th to find a humanitarian consensus to ensure that impartial humanitarian aid reaches those who depend on it. The RCRC must be able to resume humanitarian operations in the region without hindrance. Madam President, we recognize the diplomatic efforts undertaken to achieve a lasting peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan, the pursuit of constructive dialogue, and the implementation of agreements on the ground based on respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as the protection of minority rights, remain fundamental to building confidence for a long-term solution. We call on the parties to take de-escalation measures and intensify their efforts to normalize relations and reach a peace treaty. Switzerland remains ready to promote these efforts through its good offices if both parties so wish. As a council, we must do everything in our power to support efforts to resolve the remaining disputes peacefully and prevent a humanitarian catastrophe from developing. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Switzerland for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Ecuador.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm grateful for the informative briefing delivered by the Director of Operations of OCHA, Edem Basonu. I acknowledge the presence here of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia and the representatives of Azerbaijan, Turkey, and the EU. Ecuador takes note of the letters from Armenia and Azerbaijan on the situation in the Lachin corridor, circulated to the Security Council on August 11th and 14th of 2023, respectively. We note with concern reports of problems related to freedom of movement in the Lachin corridor, which has a serious impact on the humanitarian situation and risks destabilizing the region. The implications of this situation for the supply of basic necessities such as food and medicines to the local population are of great concern. We therefore call on the parties to comply with the agreements expressed in the Trilateral Declaration of November 9th, 2020, based on the Russian-mediated ceasefire, and to urgently adopt measures to facilitate access for the delivery of humanitarian aid to the civilian population. We reiterate Ecuador's position that in all cases, parties must comply with the orders and decisions of the principal judicial organ of this organization. We therefore recall the orders of the International Court of Justice on this case, including those of February and July 2023, in relation to measures to ensure the unimpeded movement of people, vehicles and cargo along the Lachin corridor in both directions. We urge the parties to speed up their efforts to peace anchored in human rights and to abstain from any actions that could exacerbate tensions and deteriorate the humanitarian and security situation for the civilian population. Ecuador hopes that negotiation efforts will continue in search of a sustainable solution to the conflict, which will allow tensions to be de-escalated in compliance with agreements reached in 2020 and to ensure the free and safe movement through the Lachin corridor. To this end, we reiterate our support for the revitalization and strengthening of peace efforts under the framework of the Minsk group of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE, and in all available frameworks, initiatives and tools for peaceful settlement, including the peace efforts of the European Union. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Ecuador for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of United Arab Emirates.
Madam President, I thank Ms. Wozorno for her thorough briefing, and I welcome the participation of His Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia, and the representatives of Armenia and Azerbaijan and the EU in this meeting. The United Arab Emirates is closely following the evolving situation along the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan and has taken note of the letters sent in the past week on developments in the region, both from Armenia to the President of the Security Council and from Azerbaijan to the Secretary General. We also take note of the Secretary General's statement dated the 2nd of August and appreciate his call to facilitate the passage of humanitarian aid to those in need. Furthermore, we acknowledge the role of the United Nations providing humanitarian assistance as stipulated in General Assembly resolutions 46/182 and 58/114. The UAE stresses the need to provide basic goods such as food, medicine and fuel, and ensuring that these items reach those in need, as well as necessary medical assistance and care in a timely manner. We commend the efforts of the International Committee of the Red Cross, and we welcome the resumption of medical evacuations. Madam President, we remain concerned about the tensions between the two sides, and once again, we call on all parties to de-escalate and exercise restraint. It is imperative to avoid unilateral measures or rhetoric that could result in dire humanitarian consequences or impede the achievement of a lasting peace. Therefore, we call for the two parties to continue resolving their differences peacefully through dialogue and diplomatic means, in line with international law, international norms, and the United Nations Charter. In this context, the UAE encourages Armenia and Azerbaijan to continue engaging constructively and in good faith within the ongoing mediation efforts, which we hope will lay the foundation for a sustainable peace. They should build on the recent meetings in Brussels and Moscow. We also look forward. We also welcome the ongoing talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and we look forward to seeing concrete steps in this direction. Now is the time for peace, and through our open lines of communication with Armenia and Azerbaijan, the UAE will continue its support all efforts that promote stability, dialogue, and peaceful coexistence between the two countries. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of United Arab Emirates. I now give the floor to the representative of Mozambique.
Madam President, Mozambique thanks the United States presidency for convening this important meeting. Our gratitude is extended to the OCHA Director of Operations and Advocacy, Ms. Adam Wosorno, for the updates she has just shared with us. They provide further insight into the difficult humanitarian situation in the Nagorno-Karabakh region. We welcome the participation in this meeting of His Excellency Mr. Arat Mirzoyan, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Armenia. We also welcome the presence of the representatives of Azerbaijan, Turkey, and the delegation of the European Union to the United Nations. Madam President, we have taken note of the content of the letter from the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Armenia, dated 11 August 2023, as well as that from the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Azerbaijan, dated 14 August 2023, both addressed to the Secretary General of the United Nations and to the President of the Security Council. In this regard, Mozambique wishes to express our deep concern over the reported difficulties faced in the delivery of humanitarian assistance to people in need in the Nagorno-Karabakh region. We believe it is the primary responsibility of all states under international humanitarian law to protect civilians in conflict situations by ensuring, inter alia, the provision of essential services, including food and health care. We therefore urge Armenia and Azerbaijan to ensure that vulnerable populations have unimpeded access to humanitarian aid. We call on the parties involved to remain committed to the agreements reached so far, including the trilateral declaration of 9 November 2020, made by Armenia, Azerbaijan, and the Russian Federation. More importantly, we appeal to the parties to abide by the relevant decisions of the International Court of Justice on the matter. It is our strong belief that bilateral issues between the two countries must be resolved through diplomatic means so as to foster mutual trust and achieve a peaceful and lasting solution to the conflict in full respect of their sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. Madam President, Mozambique attaches great importance to the role of the regional and international actors which have been actively involved in supporting and facilitating the peace process between the Republic of Armenia and the Republic of Azerbaijan. In this regard, we encourage their continuous and active engagement in seeking that the parties return to negotiations and avoid hostilities in the supreme interest of peace and for the benefit of good neighborliness of their two peoples and countries. We highly value the continuation of the good offices of the Secretary General. In the same vein, we strongly encourage the peace mediation efforts of the Minsk Group of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe and the European Union for the normalization of relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Mozambique for their statement, and I now give the floor to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Ms. Wazornu, for the helpful update. I also welcome the participation by Armenian Foreign Minister Mirzoyan and the representatives of Azerbaijan, Turkey and the European Union at this meeting. The UK remains deeply concerned at the ongoing disruption to the Lachin corridor, which threatens the supply of life-saving medication, healthcare, and other essential goods and services, resulting in humanitarian consequences for the local population. It is therefore crucial that the ICJ order of February 2023 is respected to ensure unimpeded movement along the Lachin corridor in both directions. We strongly urge parties to allow the ICRC access along all available routes, including via the Lachin corridor, for the organisation to be able to undertake its vital work. All parties must refrain from the politicisation of humanitarian aid in order to meet the needs of the civilian population. We warmly welcome the ongoing internationally mediated negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan towards a peace agreement, hosted most recently by European Council President Michel last month, and we also welcome the efforts of the United States in this regard, with high-level engagement from Secretary Blinken. We urge all parties to redouble their efforts in these talks towards a lasting settlement. It is only diplomacy, in the spirit of the UN Charter, that will bring both sides closer to peace. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam President. We thank the Director of Operations of OCHA, Edem Vasornu, for the briefing. We are concerned by the continuing blockade of the Lachin corridor. Currently, steps on the ground are needed more than ever to speedily de-escalate the situation around Nagorno-Karabakh, including by lifting the blockade on the Lachin corridor and using other humanitarian routes. The Russian Federation, in support of both parties, is making every effort to rapidly resolve this crisis and to support normalization of relations between our friendly countries of Azerbaijan and Armenia. We're doing all we can on political and diplomatic channels, on all levels and on the ground through the Russian peacekeeping force to prevent a humanitarian tragedy in the region. We continue to remain actively in contact with all parties involved to rapidly resume the stable provision of food, medicines, and other essential goods to Nagorno-Karabakh, as well as electricity and gas. All of these statements by the President of Russia, President of Azerbaijan, and Prime Minister of Armenia of 2020-2022 stand as the roadmap for reconciliation between Baku and Yerevan, to which there is no alternative. The potential of trilateral agreements is far from being exhausted, and their key element is the delimitation and subsequent demarcation of the Armenian-Azerbaijani border with the expert assistance of Russia, as well as restoring transport links as part of the trilateral working group under the co-chairmanship of the Deputy Prime Ministers of Russia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, as well as paving the way for Armenian-Azerbaijani peace dialogue and developing dialogue between parliamentarians and civil society leaders. In each of these areas, there has been significant progress. Russia plans to continue to make every effort in this regard. Armenian-Azerbaijani reconciliation is unthinkable without clear and reliable guarantees of security and respecting the rights of the residents of Nagorno-Karabakh based on universally recognized international principles in the context of the laws of Azerbaijan. This rationale stems from the repeatedly affirmed recent agreements between the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan on the recognition by each party of the territorial integrity of the other in accordance with the Alma-Ata Declaration of 1991. During negotiations of the foreign ministers of Russia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia in Moscow on July 25th, we proposed realistic compromises to de-escalate the tensions, which were taken into consideration by the parties. This would entail opening a parallel humanitarian corridor through Agdam and Lachin for movement of civilians and military cargo, and this would pave the way for speedily relaunching direct dialogue between official representatives of Baku and the population of Nagorno-Karabakh. Equally important are reciprocal pledges by the parties to refrain from politicizing this purely humanitarian issue. We hope that all participants of the process will find political resolve to overcome their disagreements in order to alleviate the dire plight of the tens of thousands of residents of Nagorno-Karabakh and to establish lasting dialogue through the Baku-Stepanakert format. Madam President, we're prepared to work with all responsible actors interested in normalizing the situation between Nagorno-Karabakh, in Nagorno-Karabakh and the Armenian-Azerbaijani reconciliation as a whole. Those who truly support this scenario based on the fundamental interests of Azerbaijanis and Armenians must set aside all geopolitical and domestic considerations. We also call for a responsible approach toward the use of the Security Council as a platform in this respect. The problems must be resolved between Baku and Yerevan in any case, and no externally imposed plans or solutions can replace dialogue between the two. For our part, we'll continue to encourage this dialogue and bring the parties closer to their good neighborly relations of old, including by using the Russian peacekeeping force. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for their statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as representative of the United States. Let me start by thanking you, Director Wosornu, for being here with us this afternoon. Colleagues, the United States is concerned about the humanitarian situation in Nagorno-Karabakh, and we're deeply troubled by the closure of the Lachin corridor, which has cut off access to essential goods and exacerbated the humanitarian situation. Access to food, medicine, baby formula, and energy should never be held hostage. We urge the government of Azerbaijan to restore free movement through the corridor, so commercial, humanitarian, and private vehicles can reach the population of Nagorno-Karabakh. We also note the possibility of compromise on additional routes for humanitarian supplies, and understand that since last December, the ICRC has facilitated medical transfers for more than 700 people in need of medical care, thanks to a critical lifeline for medically vulnerable individuals through the Lachin corridor. Neutral, impartial, humane, and independent humanitarian access and assistance, including medical transfers, must not be hindered, full stop. Colleagues, I want to stress the need for the parties to continue talks aimed at a lasting, peaceful resolution to the conflict and the normalization of relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. These peace discussions require all parties to exercise creativity, flexibility, and compromise. And let me be clear, peace in the region must include protections for the rights and security of individuals in Nagorno-Karabakh. The United States urges restraint and the immediate cessation of any activities that undermine the peace process. And we call on all sides to fully meet their obligations under international humanitarian law. The international community must continue to engage diplomatically to facilitate dialogue and a durable, dignified peace. Negotiations are vital to a lasting peace, and we support any format that allows Armenia and Azerbaijan to continue dialogue toward a peaceful resolution to the conflict. We encourage all parties to engage in direct talks, including between officials in Baku and representatives of the population of Nagorno-Karabakh. The United States is committed to promoting a peaceful, democratic, and prosperous future for the South Caucasus region. And we will continue to engage bilaterally and multilaterally with all partners to help build this brighter future. Thank you. I resume my functions as President of the Council. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Ararat Mirzoyan, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia.
Madam President, distinguished colleagues, I would like to thank the Security Council for convening this urgent meeting to discuss the humanitarian situation in Nagorno-Karabakh, stemming from the 8-month-long blockade of the Lachin corridor, the road of life connecting Nagorno-Karabakh with Armenia and the outer world. Today, I'm here to seek the support of this august body in maintaining the prospect of reaching just and comprehensive peace and stability in our region, which is seriously undermined by Azerbaijan with the humanitarian calamity on the ground in Nagorno-Karabakh. During the last 2 years, Armenia, with the help of the international community, spared no efforts to establish peace and stability in our region. And I believe today we still have the opportunity to reach this aim. But the current humanitarian situation in Nagorno-Karabakh has the full potential to deteriorate the perspectives of peace in the whole region of South Caucasus and even beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, today I would like to elaborate, suggesting you to judge not based on justifications that you might consider being true or false, but on values and facts. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights starts with recognition of the inherent dignity and the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family as the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Irrespective of their residence, all human beings are entitled to human rights and dignity. They should be treated with highest respect and care, even at time of war. Unfortunately, the people of Nagorno-Karabakh are deprived from such treatment, finding themselves in a condition of a total siege. Now, let me present the events, facts, and figures which show the current realities in blockaded Nagorno-Karabakh. So, November 9, 2020, trilateral statement signed by the leaders of Armenia, Russia, and Azerbaijan, according to paragraph 6 of which, I'm quoting, the Lachin corridor, 5 kilometers wide, which will provide the connection between Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia, shall remain under control of the Russian Federation peacekeeping forces, end of quote. December 12, 2022. Azerbaijan blocked the Lachin corridor under a fake pretext of environmental concerns. Since then, gradual utilization of limited domestic stocks has resulted in an acute food shortage and closures of stores. Prior to the blockade, around 90% of all consumed food was imported from Armenia, and with every passing day, the people of Nagorno-Karabakh don't receive 400 tons of essential goods daily. Currently, there is a severe lack of food, including nutrition for kids, flour, sugar, as well as medicine, fuel, etc. Moreover, due to the absence of fuel and targeting of the workers by Azerbaijan, almost all agricultural work has halted. As a result, approximately 10,000 hectares of land adjacent to the contact line remain uncultivated. December 20, 2022. The UN Security Council discussed the issue for the first time, and the vast majority of Council members called Azerbaijan to lift the blockade. Since December 2022, periodically, and March 2023 completely, in sum for around 180 days, Azerbaijan disrupted the only supply of natural gas to Nagorno-Karabakh. Halting the gas supply has already led to a number of adverse humanitarian consequences, such as disruption of the work of hospitals, disruption of the educational process at the schools and kindergartens, disruption of the work of vitally important institutions and social services, inability of people to heat their homes, loss of the access of many households to hot water, lack of fuel for vehicles, etc. Since January 9, 2023, now more than 210 days, Azerbaijan has disrupted the supply of electricity through the sole high-voltage line between Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. Since then, relying on limited local resources of electricity, Nagorno-Karabakh had to implement rolling power outages with only a few hours of energy supply. February 22, 2023. The International Court of Justice indicated a provisional measure in the ongoing case concerning the application of the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, Armenia versus Azerbaijan, according to which Azerbaijan shall, I quote, take all measures to ensure unimpeded movement of persons, vehicles and cargo along the Lachin corridor in both directions. April 23, 2023. Azerbaijan, in violation of the ICJ decision and the trilateral statement of November 9, 2020, installed a checkpoint in the Lachin corridor. June 15 this year, Azerbaijan went further with fully blocking the Lachin corridor by banning any access to Nagorno-Karabakh, even humanitarian, including of the International Committee of Red Cross, could have provided some food, medicine, fuel, etc. July 6, 2023, the International Court of Justice reconfirmed its provisional measure from February 22, 2023. July 25 this year, ICRC, the only international humanitarian organization that has been operating in Nagorno-Karabakh for more than 30 years, stated, and I quote, despite persistent efforts, the ICRC is not currently able to bring humanitarian assistance to the civilian population through the Lachin corridor or through any other routes. End of quote. July 26. The Republic of Armenia sent a humanitarian convoy, which up to now remains at the entrance of the Lachin corridor, as the Azerbaijani side denies the access. August 2. The UN Secretary General reiterated his deep concern over the challenges related to the freedom of movement along the Lachin corridor, recalling the previous statement on the need to implement the orders of the ICJ, I'm quoting, including the orders issued on 22nd of February and reaffirmed on 6th of July, related to the measures to ensure unimpeded movement of persons, vehicles and cargo along the Lachin corridor in both directions, end of quote. The Secretary General further expressed particular concern about the deteriorating humanitarian situation on the ground and called for, I quote, urgent steps to facilitate access for the delivery of humanitarian assistance to people in need, end of quote. August 7 this year, a group of the UN human rights experts, the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, Special Rapporteur on the Right to Education, the Independent Expert on the Enjoyment of all human rights by other persons, and the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities expressed alarm over the ongoing blockade of the Lachin corridor by Azerbaijan and the dire humanitarian crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh, which, I quote, has left the population facing acute shortages and placed the lives of the residents, especially children, persons with disabilities, older persons, pregnant women, and the sick at significant risk. To sum up, due to the blockade, there is no any economic activity in Nagorno-Karabakh. Thousands of people are left unemployed as there is no possibility to pay the salaries. Even those people that have money, they are not able to buy anything as the shelves in the stores are empty. Women, children, elderly, stay in long queues in order to be able to buy some bread or fruits and vegetables. Sometimes they have to pass dozens of kilometers on foot to reach empty shops and pharmacies. The authorities of Nagorno-Karabakh had to issue ration coupons for certain food products, including rice, porridge, sugar, etc. There is a real threat of hunger. Here are some other figures, ladies and gentlemen. 120,000. This is the number of people living in Nagorno-Karabakh, which is deprived to exercise their basic human rights. 20,000, the number of elderly people who are even unable to move due to the absence of public transportation. 30,000, the number of children living in Nagorno-Karabakh who are struggling from malnutrition and lack of food. 270, the number of children who are not able to return and reunite with their families in Nagorno-Karabakh. 2,000, the number of pregnant women residing in Nagorno-Karabakh who don't have even basic access to health care, 9,000. The number of people with disabilities who are deprived from proper medical care, 4,700 and 8,450. The number of people with diabetes and circulatory diseases, respectively, who are running out of essential medicine. All these events have doubled the rate of deaths in Nagorno-Karabakh for the past 8 months. Furthermore, the absence of medicine, sanitizers, and other items of hygiene create risks of epidemics. 710. The total number of the patients and the accompanying persons evacuated by the ICRC throughout the whole period of blockade that went through a humiliating procedure of proving their health condition in order to get permission to be evacuated. 1. A man with a very concrete name and surname, Vagiv Khachatryan, who was abducted at the checkpoint being transported by the ICRC to Armenia for heart surgery. He was abducted while being under international humanitarian protection. This is by far not the only incident when Azerbaijan intentionally obstructed the work of the ICRC. Again, 1. Another man with a very concrete name and surname, Karo Hovanesyan, who passed away yesterday. And according to the Autospy report, he died because of starvation and lasting malnutrition. 2 3-year-old Leo and 6-year-old Gita, who died in Martakert, as their mom had to live there alone, go on foot to the nearby town with the hope to find some food for them. Ladies and gentlemen, during the previous months, many of you tried to address the issue of opening the Lachin corridor. However, despite all the calls, the commitments undertaken by trilateral statement from November 9, 2020, the legally binding orders of the ICJ, the situation did not improve on the ground. Quite contrary, Azerbaijan incrementally but consistently severed the blockade of the degree, to the degree of complete siege of Nagorno-Karabakh. Armenia raised its concerns on deepening the humanitarian crisis as a result of closure of Lachin corridor in all negotiations with Azerbaijan, which were separately facilitated and mediated by the United States of America, European Union, Russia, and yet to no avail. Throughout this time, Azerbaijan engagement has been anything but not in good faith. Back to the first discussion on this issue in the Security Council, Azerbaijan denied any responsibility on the actions thereon and even claimed that it was not controlling the Lachin corridor. Throughout the past 8 months, Azerbaijan brought a number of pretexts aimed at justifying its actions. First, it was so-called eco-activists with environmental concerns, then baseless allegations of transporting arms through the Lachin corridor, furthermore, military provocations, and so on. The Lachin corridor has been agreed as a link between Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh and has no alternative. The Lachin corridor should be opened, and when it comes to other possible communications, this should be addressed within an international mechanism of Baku-Stepanakert dialogue. So today, I'm here to seek your support to address issues of very humanitarian nature, and we expect from this Council to condemn the use of starvation of civilians as a method of warfare prohibited by the international law, to condemn the unlawful denial of humanitarian access and depriving the civilian population in Nagorno-Karabakh of objects indispensable to their survival, including willfully impeding relief supply and access for responses to conflict-induced food insecurity, to demand full compliance with obligations under the international humanitarian law, including those related to the protection of civilians, in particular women and children, and critical civilian infrastructure, to call for the immediate restoration of freedom and security of movement of persons, vehicles and cargo, in line with the previously reached agreements through the Lachin corridor, to ensure full cooperation of the parties in good faith with the International Committee of Red Cross and safe and unimpeded delivery of humanitarian assistance, to dispatch an independent interagency needs assessment mission in Nagorno-Karabakh and provide humanitarian assistance to the affected population. These humanitarian issues clearly need to be resolved with the international community's strong intervention before the negative consequences result in ethnic cleansing of the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. According to the elected representatives of Nagorno-Karabakh, and I quote, "This is a deliberately engineered crime driven by evident genocidal intent. The Azerbaijani authorities purposefully instigated the blockade of Lachin corridor with the knowledge that it would subject the entire population of Nagorno-Karabakh to a gradual demise, yet choose to persist with the course of action. At the same time, the report of International Criminal Court former prosecutor Luis Moreno Ocampo reflects that it is already a genocide that is happening in Nagorno-Karabakh. According to Mr. Ocampo, I quote, "The blockade of the Lachin corridor by the Azerbaijani security forces, impeding access to any food, medical supplies, and other essentials should be considered a genocide under Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction. Starvation is the invisible genocide weapon. Without immediate dramatic change, this group of Armenians will be destroyed in a few weeks." End of quote. Distinguished Council, the prevention of such a catastrophe is a core duty of the United Nations and this Council. I do believe that this distinguished body, despite of geopolitical differences, has capacity to act as genocide prevention body and not as genocide commemoration when it might be too late. In conclusion, I would like to come back to the very beginning of my intervention. One of the most important principles of the United Nations is leaving no one behind. And Edwin, 4 years old, Anastasia, 6 years old, Maria, 7 years old, David, 5 years old, Tatev, 5 years old, Samuel, 8 years old, and many others still have a hope that they will not be left behind. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency, Mr. Marzoyan, for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Azerbaijan.
Thank you, Madam President. Given the statement I have just heard, I shall start by categorically rejecting all the unfounded and groundless allegations on blockade or humanitarian crisis propagated by Armenia against my country. What Armenia tries to present as a humanitarian matter is indeed the provocative and irresponsible political campaign to undermine the sovereignty and territorial integrity of my country. It is Armenia that for almost 30 years had blatantly disregarded the relevant foreign resolutions and series of presidential statements of the Security Council, that unequivocally demanded full, immediate, and unconditional withdrawal of occupying forces from the territory of Azerbaijan. Against this backdrop, Armenia's actions are nothing but the embodiment of designed political hypocrisy, and its appeal to the Security Council is a part of the campaign that it has been pursuing over the months to manipulate and mislead the international community. Had Armenia been sincere in its quest to help, it would have been done and happened immediately. It was indeed within practical reach very recently, days ago, as a result of active involvement of international actors, including some members of the Security Council. This did not materialize only due to the refusal by Armenia itself, following the series of intensive consultations and shuttle diplomacy, agreements were finally reached with respect to the delivery of humanitarian cargo to the Karabakh region through various routes, as well as the organization of a meeting between special representative of the government and representatives of local Armenian residents. On the first case, concrete blocks and all other physical barriers installed by the Armenian side on Aghdam-Khankandi Road should have been removed to allow the delivery of humanitarian cargo by the International Committee of the Red Cross to the local residents. This should have been followed by upscaling the usage of the Lachen Road by the ICRC within 24 hours. All the parties involved, including the Russian peacekeeping contingent and the ICRC, were prepared to commence implementation of this deal practically within 1 hour. Unfortunately, during the briefing by distinguished representative of OCHA, we have heard a lot of references to ICRC. So I would like also to seek this particular information from ICRC and to prove it also through the further communications. On the second case, the meeting between representatives of the central authorities and of local Armenian residents was agreed to take place in nearby city of Yevlakh. Regrettably, on August 5th, Armenia, through its illegally installed regime, backstepped from the both agreements at a very last moment by introducing politically motivated and illegitimate preconditions and various pretexts. There should be no doubt that notwithstanding the intensive engagement by Azerbaijan with the Russian Federation, the United States, the European Union, the ICRC for finding ways out of the situation, Armenia has been deliberately obstructing diplomatic efforts. There is only one explanation for that. Armenia is not willing to be a part of the solution. Instead, it artificially ignites tension in the region with a view to continuing manipulation and misleading at international level. Madam President, the breach of the agreement on the delivery of humanitarian goods by the ICRC on August 5th is not the only obstruction. In fact, it is continuation of Armenia's politicization of the presence and activities of this humanitarian organization and its reckless attempt to exploit humanitarian matters for political purposes by challenging the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Azerbaijan and preventing the reintegration of local ethnic Armenian residents. Here are the facts that speak for themselves. Immediately after the end of the war in 2020, Azerbaijan offered its logistics and infrastructure to the ICRC for the delivery of goods to the Karabakh region of Azerbaijan. In 2021, those goods were transported to Barda city, to the field office of ICRC, to be delivered to the area. The Armenian side rejected it and prevented the ICRC from delivering humanitarian assistance. Right after the start of protests by eco-activists on the section of the Lachen-Khankandi route, Azerbaijan requested the ICRC to present the list of goods needed by the local residents and expressed its readiness to provide all logistical and infrastructural support for their delivery. The ICRC came back with the response that the Armenian side didn't want any supply through Azerbaijan. Armenia resorted to the unprecedented action, abusing the ICRC for smuggling dual-use technologies and other stuff such as microchips, to the Karabakh region. CRC had to acknowledge this fact, which is a serious blow to the humanitarian mandate and the reputation of the committee. Armenia rejected to accept RCRC's Baku-based international medical personnel to be deployed to Hankandi. It was the proposal by the RCRC itself to facilitate medical evacuations and help deal with medical issues on the ground, and it was supported by my country. Armenia's abuse of RCRC for its political purposes also makes it crystal clear that the calls for increased international presence, including UN-affiliated organizations, have nothing to do with the humanitarian concerns. Instead, the aim is getting more tools for manipulations. Madam President, the Karabakh region of Azerbaijan, it is an internationally recognized territory of my country. And the ethnic Armenians living there are considered the residents of my country, the Republic of Azerbaijan. The government of Azerbaijan is strongly committed to guarantee and secure the access of these residents to the necessary goods and establishing appropriate living conditions for them. These objectives are fully in line with international law and international humanitarian law principles, underscoring Azerbaijan's unwavering dedication to upholding these standards. Madam President, the so-called Lachen Corridor is a road within the sovereign territory of Azerbaijan without any extraterritorial status. It's primarily intended for the movement of citizens, vehicles, and goods under the trilateral statement of November 10, 2020. In adherence to its commitments under this statement, Azerbaijan has allowed movement along this road. This remains intact after the establishment by Azerbaijan of the checkpoint on its border with Armenia. The border checkpoint was established in exercise of Azerbaijan's inherent right to safeguard its sovereignty and security, to prevent the consistent and blatant abuse by Armenia of this route for illegal military and other activities. And I repeat, to prevent the consistent and blatant abuse by Armenia of this route for illegal military and other activities, such as rotation of its some 10,000 military personnel, illegally stationed in the territory of Azerbaijan, transfer of weaponry, ammunition, landmines, foreign nationals and terrorists thereto, as well as unlawful extraction and transfer of natural resources from this territory. This is humanitarian assistance. The unanimous decision by the International Court of Justice on July 6 this year to reject Armenia's request for an interim measure of the removal of the checkpoint definitively dismissed Armenia's allegations that the Lachen checkpoint is illegal. The establishment of the border checkpoint has not impeded the civilian movement along the Lachen road. There has been, in fact, a notable increase in such a movement until June 15 of this year. On that date, another unwarranted provocation by Armenia unfolded when its armed forces attacked Azerbaijani border guards and accompanying Russian peacekeeping forces. This attack resulted in severe injury to an Azerbaijani border guard and concurrently posed a direct threat to the ICRC staff and civilians passing through the checkpoint. Madam President, if Armenia were genuinely concerned about the ordinary residents of the region, it would never have objected the usage of Aghdam-Khankandi Road for the delivery of goods to the Karabakh region. This road is connected to the one of the major transportation routes of Azerbaijan, known as Silk Road or M2 Highway, which provides a reliable connection to international markets. Compared to the 59 kilometers long Lachin-Khankendi road passing through mountainous and serpentine terrain, this road is only 18 kilometers long between Agdam and Khankendi. Today, within their visit to Agdam, representatives of diplomatic corps accredited to Azerbaijan, including United Nations Residence Coordination Office and other UN institutions, had also a chance to witness that the road was functional and ready for transportation goods. Here I would like to refer to you. You have on your tables this map, which clearly demonstrates the ability, logistical place, international airports on the territory of Azerbaijan to secure and provide all necessary assistance to population in need. Equally are ungrounded the false allegations on genocide. At this point, Armenia's manipulative and deceptive campaign involved the so-called opinion by Mr. Luis Moreno Ocampo, who presents himself as an independent expert. The flaws in Mr. Ocampo's assertions have been identified in detail by a prominent international law expert, Mr. Rodney Dixon, in his preliminary report, which underlines that Ocampo's opinion lacks substantiation, is incomplete, and displays numerous inaccuracies. As such, there is no foundation for claiming that a genocide is currently being perpetrated. Specifically, Mr. Dixon finds that Ocampo's opinion, patently selective in the facts, in particular, given his failure to mention Armenia's rejection of Azerbaijan's proposal of alternative routes to supply local Armenian residents. Such manipulations under humanitarian pretexts are not isolated from the increased illegal and provocative military activities. Over past weeks, the Armenian armed forces illegally remaining in the territory of Azerbaijan in a blatant violation of international law, as well as Armenia's commitment under paragraph 4 of the trilateral statement of the leaders of Azerbaijan, the Russian Federation of Armenia, have intensified the military engineering works and other military buildup. The use of radio-electronic warfare equipment illegally deployed in the sovereign territory of Azerbaijan is of particular concern. Not only civilian aircrafts of the Azerbaijani airlines, but also those of foreign countries have been subjected to radio-electronic interference over past weeks, posing serious risk to their safety. Today, an attempt by reconnaissance group of the Armenian armed forces to infiltrate the territory of Azerbaijan and to carry out divergent operations in the Kalbayar district was prevented, and a member of this group, Vaskanyan Gagik Ashotovich, date of birth 1983, armed with the machine gun and ammunition, was detained. Mr. President, Armenia must refrain from provocations, cease its actions undermining the sovereignty and territorial integrity of my country, abstain from meddling in our internal affairs, and genuinely engage in post-conflict normalization negotiations. It is of vital importance that the historic opportunity for durable peace in the region is not missed. Verbal statements by the leadership of Armenia on the recognition of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Azerbaijan, including the Karabakh region, created a ground for cautious optimism that peace is indeed within reach. Now Armenia has to transform this statement into the real deeds and refrain from questioning the sovereignty of Azerbaijan, including under the pretext of humanitarian needs of the local Armenian residents of the Karabakh region of my country. Over the past few months, concerted efforts to intensify the normalization process with active engagement of international partners have yielded promising results. These diplomatic dialogues have played a crucial role in bringing differences and achieving tangible progress on several articles of the future bilateral agreement aimed at establishing a lasting peace and interstate relations. Azerbaijan pursues the policy of integration of ethnic Armenian residents of the Karabakh region as equal citizens, guaranteeing all the rights and freedoms envisaged in the Constitution of Azerbaijan and all relevant international human rights mechanisms that Azerbaijan is signatory to. Our adherence to both these tracks is firm, as we are firm to protect our sovereignty and territorial integrity by all legitimate means enshrined in the UN Charter and international law. We are confident that the international community, and first of all the Security Council, will support this approach based on equal and reciprocal respect for the legitimate interests of both countries through mutual recognition and respect of each other's country sovereignty, territorial integrity, and inviolability of borders. Madam President, I have also something to show to the August body. Social media outlets are full of numerous video clips and photos of local Armenian residents in Khankendi celebrating birthdays, anniversaries, weddings, and all the good occasions. And indeed, we wish them well. These photo and video facts convincingly refute the allegations about the starvation, famine, and humanitarian crisis. People are happy, they dancing at their wedding party. This is celebration, very tasty cookies, etc., etc., etc. I'm happy to share this information with my distinguished neighbor at my right. Please use it in your work. I thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Azerbaijan for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Turkey.
Madam President, can you hear me? Yeah. Madam President, thank you for inviting us to this meeting. As a country with vested interest in regional peace and stability and actively engaged in initiatives towards this objective, Turkey is concerned with the attempts of Armenia to exploit international platforms, including UN Security Council, to express politically motivated and unsubstantiated allegations regarding the Lachin Road. We need to address this issue in its proper context. First and foremost, the legitimate concerns of Azerbaijan have to be taken into account, and its inherent sovereign rights have to be respected. Azerbaijan has been expressing concerns on the abuse of Lachin Road for supplying armed groups and illegal mine exploitation in Karabakh for a long time. However, these concerns and sensitivities were not taken into account, and Azerbaijan felt it obliged to take measures on its own territory as it deemed appropriate within the framework of its sovereign rights. We know that Azerbaijan has exercised care to observe humanitarian considerations while these measures were implemented. As a matter of fact, medical evacuations through the Lachen Road is possible, and Azerbaijan has already allocated the Akdam-Hankendir Road for supplying needs of the Armenian residents in Karabakh. Moreover, Azerbaijan has demonstrated its willingness to establish dialogue with the representatives of the local Armenian people to address the issue in a substantial manner. Unfortunately, Azerbaijan's sincere efforts have not been reciprocated. Madam President, we remain convinced as Turkey that there is a historical opportunity for comprehensive peace, stability, and cooperation in the region. To this end, we expressed our commitment to full normalization process with Armenia and took steps in this direction. We continue to strongly support peace talks between Azerbaijan and Armenia. It is our firm belief that regional normalization can only be attained through dialogue and goodwill. We will continue to take part in, encourage, and support efforts towards this goal. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Turkey for their statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Silvio Gonzato, Chargé d'Affaires of the Delegation of the European Union to the United Nations.
Thank you, Madam President, for giving me the opportunity to take the floor, and thank you also to Madam Wasumu for her briefing. Madam President, the European Union is following with great concern the serious humanitarian situation affecting the local population, the former Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast. Movement through the Lachen corridor has been obstructed for more than 8 months, despite orders by the International Court of Justice to reopen it. Since 15th of June, there's been a blockage of the Lachen corridor with the exception of occasional medical evacuations. Medical supplies and essential goods are reportedly in critically short supply or have already run out, with dire consequences for local population. The EU deplores that the ICRC activities in the region have been heavily impacted and calls for their full resumption, including medical evacuations and humanitarian supplies. Humanitarian access must not be politicized by any actors. Movement through the Lachen corridor must be reopened immediately. Based on the November 2020 trilateral statement and the February 2023 ICJ order, the Azerbaijani authorities bear the responsibility to guarantee safety and freedom of movement along the Lachen corridor and to ensure the crisis does not escalate further. We've taken note of the expressed readiness of the Azerbaijani authorities to also supply goods via the city of Akdam. This should, however, not be seen as an alternative to the reopening of the Lachen corridor. The population on the ground needs reassurances, first and foremost regarding their rights and security. The EU reiterates its call for direct dialogue between Baku and the Karabakh Armenians. This dialogue should build much-needed confidence for all those involved. The EU has also been following the growing tensions between Azerbaijan and Armenia over the past month along their international border, with shooting incidents reported almost on a daily basis. The EU monitoring mission in Armenia is conducting patrols along the Armenian side of the international border with Azerbaijan to observe and report on the situation. The objective of the mission is to contribute to conflict resolution and build confidence between Armenia and Azerbaijan. We call on all sides to avoid further incidents and return to dialogue. The European Union, and in particular, President of the European Council Charles Michel, have been heavily engaged in supporting the normalization process between Armenia and Azerbaijan since the end of 2021. At the last trilateral meeting hosted by President Charles Michel with President Aliyev of Azerbaijan and Prime Minister Pashinyan of Armenia on the 15th of July 2023, the leaders of the two countries reiterated their strong commitment to the peace process. They notably reconfirmed their full respect of the other country's territorial integrity and sovereignty, and their unequivocal commitment to the 1991 Almaty Declaration as a political framework for the delimitation. As a matter priority, violence, harsh rhetoric, and the spreading of disinformation should stop in order to provide a conducive environment for peace and normalization talks. A return to dialogue in good faith remains as urgent as ever. This requires the genuine commitment of all sides to negotiated outcomes and a future built on common interests and mutual trust. Unfortunately, the current deteriorating humanitarian situation of the Karabakh Armenians is harming the peace process. Humanitarian issues need to be resolved, and concrete steps should urgently be taken to build trust. The European Union remains fully committed to facilitating dialogue between both sides in order to ensure long-lasting peace for the benefit of all people in the region. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Gonzato for his statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.
But now a recession and inflation has hit. The cost of food and other basic goods is soaring. The price of rice, for example, has risen by 70%. Many go to bed hungry. There's hardly any state aid, so it's volunteers who are left to help the country's most vulnerable.
Where is my next meal coming from? That's a constant worry for most of the people Padre Julio is helping here. The Catholic priest provides support to people in Sao Paulo who have no roof over their heads. The Brazilian government won't help them, he says, so others are stepping in.
The government often says it makes policies for everyone, but it doesn't. Pope Francis talks about people sometimes being disposed of like trash. People who the government wants to get rid of because they're considered of no use. And that's exactly what we're experiencing here.